It had been a month since Evelyn Harper vanished on her favorite mountain trail, but for her husband, James Harper, the nightmare of not knowing had only just begun. The police, convinced it was a tragic hiking accident, had scaled back their search, leaving James to return to the mountain alone, desperately retracing her last known steps. He felt a deep sense of guilt. The day she disappeared, they'd had a terrible fight about their failing marriage, and her last words to him were that she needed to clear her head. Now, with a forecast of a coming snowstorm threatening to bury the mountain under a fresh blanket of white, he knew his window to find any answers was closing fast. Do you know what happened to Evelyn Harper? Was she in a tragic accident, or did something more sinister happen? Share your thoughts in the comments below, but first, let me tell you this story from the very beginning. The photo on his phone screen was a constant torment. It showed Evelyn, her face alight with joy, standing on a sun-drenched trail. It was a selfie she'd taken with her smartphone, her favorite trail-running shorts and headlamp visible. The image, time-stamped exactly 1 month ago, was the last clear picture anyone had of her. The trail, a popular route near their home in the mountains, was supposed to be a safe place. A month of searching had yielded nothing. No body, no signs of a fall. Nothing but a cold, empty trail. The police had officially declared it a probable hiking accident, but James couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Their last conversation, a shouting match fueled by months of marital tension, replayed in his mind. He had accused her of being distant, of putting her running above their relationship. She had stormed out, promising she'd be back once she had cleared her head. He had never seen her again. The guilt was a physical weight on his chest, a constant ache that made it impossible to eat or sleep. Driven by a desperate need for answers, James decided to go back to the mountain himself before the storm arrived. The snow would erase any faint clues that might still exist. He packed a small backpack with water and a compass and set off, a photograph of Evelyn pinned to his chest. As he walked, every turn in the trail felt like a familiar wound. He saw her ghost everywhere, her running with a light step over a rocky patch, her smiling at him from behind a tree. His grief was raw and overwhelming, but he pushed it down, focusing on the search. He knew her route by heart, but he had an idea. What if she didn't stay on the main trail? What if, in her anger, she had veered off, seeking a less traveled path to be alone? Ignoring the well-worn trail, James began searching the dense, overgrown brush off to the side. The terrain was rough, with thorny bushes and uneven ground, making progress slow and painful. He had to push through thickets, his clothes snagging on thorns, his boots slipping on loose rocks. A feeling of foolishness crept in. This was a wild goose chase. The police had already searched this area. Hadn't they? He pushed on, his desperation overriding his doubt. He moved through the brush for what felt like hours, his hopes dwindling with every step. Just as he was about to give up, a flicker of dark blue caught his eye. It was hanging from a thorny branch about 30 feet from the trail. His heart leaped into his throat. He stumbled forward, ignoring the scratches on his arms and face. As he got closer, his breath hitched. It was a pair of running shorts, torn and snagged, their familiar blue color undeniable. It was a pair of shorts Evelyn wore. His hands trembled as he reached out to touch them. They were caked with dirt, with several large tears, as if someone had violently ripped them from her body. As he looked at the ground beneath the shorts, his eyes fell upon a crushed object. It was a headlamp. The glass shattered and the plastic casing cracked. A rush of cold realization hit him. This wasn't an accident. Evelyn didn't just fall. This was a crime scene. She had been pursued, attacked. She didn't fall from a cliff. She was pushed. A new surge of terror and anger coursed through him. He immediately pulled out his phone and called the police, his voice trembling as he spoke. He tried to explain the discovery, his voice choked with emotion. Detective Samuel Anderson, the lead investigator on the case, listened patiently on the other end. "Mr. Harper, I understand this is difficult. We'll send a team out to that location right away. Please, do not touch anything. We'll need you to guide us to the exact spot." James stayed at the scene, a mix of relief and dread washing over him. The snow began to fall, large wet flakes drifting down from the gray sky. He watched them gather on the shorts, covering the shattered headlamp. This was it, the final piece of the puzzle. Now the police would find her. As the search and rescue team arrived, they carefully documented everything. They took photos of the shorts and the headlamp, then carefully collected them for forensic analysis. A search party was immediately dispatched to comb the surrounding area for any additional clues or signs of a body. The next few days were a blur of questions and agonizing waits. Detective Anderson came to his home, his expression grim. Mr. Harper, the forensic report is in. The shorts and headlamp belong to your wife. The tears on the shorts are consistent with a struggle, and the headlamp was smashed with a heavy, blunt object. We've also found some blood on the shorts, but the DNA testing will take a few more days. A new weight settled on James's shoulders. The police were no longer looking for a missing person. They were investigating a murder. Do you have any enemies, Mr. Harper? The detective asked. Did you know of anyone who might have wanted to harm your wife? James shook his head, his mind racing. The only person who had reason to be angry with Evelyn, who had a motive, was himself. The next morning, the police returned with a warrant. They went through their home, collecting clothes, shoes, and any personal items that might contain DNA. James watched in stunned silence as his life was picked apart, their shared history reduced to evidence. He knew what they were thinking. He was the most obvious suspect. He was the last person to see her. They had a motive, a fight about their failing marriage. He had also been the one to find the evidence, a fact that made him look even more guilty. He tried to explain, to reason with them, but his words seemed to fall on deaf ears. The police were relentless. They questioned him for hours, probing his alibi, his relationship with Evelyn, their last fight. He felt like he was drowning, his guilt suffocating him. He wanted to tell them everything, about his desperation to find her, about the relief he felt when he found the evidence, but he knew they would only see it as a desperate attempt to cover his tracks. The blood report came back a few days later. The blood on the shorts was Evelyn's. The trail had gone cold again. The police had no other suspects. James was charged with her murder, and the story of his arrest spread like wildfire. He was now a criminal in the eyes of his community, a murderer in the eyes of the law. The trial was a spectacle, a public airing of his and Evelyn's private life. The prosecution painted a picture of a jealous husband, a failing marriage, and a brutal murder. James's defense team, a public defender who had little hope of winning, fought to prove his innocence, but the evidence was stacked against him. The jury was out for only a few hours before returning with a verdict. Guilty. James was sentenced to life in prison. He had lost everything. His wife. His freedom. His life. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was being punished for a crime he didn't commit, but he had no one to blame but himself. He had been so consumed by his guilt and grief that he had made himself an easy target. Years passed, the mountain of his life, now a prison cell. He had given up on finding the truth. The memory of Evelyn faded, replaced by the bitter reality of his life. Then one day a letter arrived. It was from a private investigator named Daniel Harris. He was a retired police officer who had worked on Evelyn's case. The letter stated that he believed James was innocent and that he had evidence to prove it. James's heart thumped in his chest, a glimmer of hope, a small, fragile light in the darkness. He wrote back immediately, asking for more information. A few days later, a second letter arrived. It contained a photo. It was a picture of Evelyn, a photo she had never shown him, a photo taken on a separate occasion from the trail photo. She was wearing a new pair of shoes, a pair he had never seen before. The private investigator explained that he had found the photo in a file from the original investigation. He had spent years digging into the case, looking for any inconsistency, any small detail that didn't fit. He had found it in a pair of shoes. He had also found an interview with a park ranger who had been on duty that day. The park ranger, David Patterson, had a strong memory. He had seen Evelyn and an unknown man on the trail that day, but his report was lost in the shuffle of the investigation. Daniel Harris had found him and re-interviewed him, and David's story was now a crucial piece of the puzzle. The private investigator's work led to the reopening of the case. The police were forced to admit that they had made a mistake. James was exonerated and released from prison. He was a free man, but the years he had lost could never be returned. The truth, however, finally came out. Daniel Harris had found the man from the Ranger's report. He was a wealthy businessman named Jonathan Reed. Jonathan was a known serial killer who had a penchant for killing women who reminded him of his ex-wife. He had seen Evelyn on the trail that day, and her resemblance to his ex-wife had led him to pursue her. He had attacked her, smashed her headlamp, and left her for dead, but she had managed to escape, running deep into the forest. She had stumbled upon a cabin where she had been found by a kind, elderly couple who had cared for her until she was strong enough to return to her family. Evelyn was alive, but she was a different person. The attack had left her with a severe case of amnesia. She couldn't remember her name, her family, or her past. She only had a faint memory of the cabin and the kindness of the couple who had saved her. She had been living with them for years, her identity a mystery to her. When the police finally found her, they were able to restore her identity. She had been so distraught when she learned of her husband's imprisonment that she couldn't bring herself to face him. He had been charged with her murder, and she couldn't understand why. She had no memory of the person he was, only of the crime he was accused of. The couple, now reunited, faced a long and difficult journey. James had to rebuild his life, his reputation, and his relationship with a woman who had no memory of their life together. Evelyn, for her part, had to grapple with the shocking reality of her past, of a life she couldn't remember, of a husband she didn't recognize, and of a crime she couldn't comprehend. The love story that had been shattered by a brutal attack now had to be rebuilt from scratch, from the ashes of a tragedy that had nearly consumed them both. They had a long way to go, but they had each other. And for the first time in years, James had hope. What do you think? Did James get justice after all those years? Or was it too little, too late? How would you have reacted if you were in his shoes? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more true crime stories. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you in the next one.